Drive, Ethan. Madison Whitmore cried as rain hammered the windshield and the black limousine shuddered on the empty mountain road. Do not stop for anyone, her security chief shouted from the front passenger seat, but his voice cracked in a way Ethan Cole noticed immediately. The bridge is out, Madison whispered, staring through the glass at the flashing hazard lights ahead. Then why? Ethan said quietly, both hands steady on the wheel. Did someone move the detour sign? 3 seconds later, the broke single dad she had hired as a driver stopped looking like a driver at all. His shoulders settled, his breathing slowed, and the tired kindness in his eyes gave way to something disciplined, trained, and deeply calm. The kind of calm that does not come from confidence, but from storms survived long before anyone was watching. 72 hours earlier, no one in the marble lobby of Whitmore Global would have believed that Ethan Cole could save anyone. He walked in wearing a faded navy jacket, clean but old boots, and a white shirt pressed so carefully it almost hid how little he owned. The receptionist looked him up and down as if he had taken a wrong turn from a gas station. 2 junior executives stopped whispering just long enough to smile. A man near the elevators muttered, "That's the new driver?" Ethan heard it. He simply adjusted the folder under his arm and kept walking. There was dignity in the way he moved, not loud, not proud, just quiet enough to make careless people mistake it for weakness. Upstairs, Madison Whitmore waited behind a glass desk with the skyline of Chicago burning gold behind her. At 36, she owned companies, private aircraft, hotels, and enough influence to make governors return her calls before breakfast. Her suit was gray, her posture exact, her expression polished by years of boardrooms where trust was treated like a liability. She glanced at Ethan's resume for less than 10 seconds. "You have gaps in your employment," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You have no corporate driving experience." "No, ma'am." "And you need this job badly." Ethan looked at her then, not pleading, not ashamed. "My daughter needs her medicine. I need work." Those are not the same thing. For the first time, Madison paused. Outside the conference room, someone laughed softly. Inside, the air seemed to tighten around one simple truth. This man had very little money, but he had not surrendered his respect. Madison leaned back, studying the gray at his temples, the calluses on his hands, the wedding ring he still wore though the file said widower. "I need a driver for 3 days," she said. "Private route. No questions. No attention." Ethan nodded once. "I can do quiet." Madison almost smiled. "Good. Around here, quiet people last longer." Ethan picked up his folder and stood. "Sometimes they see more, too." She looked up sharply, but he was already turning toward the door, unaware that the secret trip she was planning would soon place her life, her company, and her frozen heart in the hands of a single father everyone had already underestimated. The first morning Ethan reported for duty, Chicago wore a pale autumn chill that made every breath look honest. He arrived at 5:45, 15 minutes early, carrying a thermos of black coffee and a folded note from Lily tucked inside his jacket pocket. "Be safe, Daddy," she had written in purple crayon, with a tiny star beside his name. He read it once before stepping toward the private garage beneath Whitmore Tower, then placed it carefully near his heart. Down below, the air smelled of polished concrete, cold metal, and expensive leather. A row of black vehicles waited under white lights, each one clean enough to reflect a man's doubts back at him. Ethan did not touch anything until he had checked the tires, mirrors, fuel range, emergency kit, and route tablet. He moved slowly, not because he was unsure, but because careful men do not need an audience to do things right. "You always inspect a car like it is going to war?" a voice asked behind him. Ethan turned. Victor Lang, Madison's head of security, stood with 2 guards near the elevator, his coat pressed, his smile thin. "I inspect what I am responsible for," Ethan said. One guard laughed under his breath. "Relax, driver. You are not Secret Service." Ethan closed the trunk gently. "No, sir. I am just the man behind the wheel." Victor stepped closer, studying him as if poverty were a stain. "Miss Whitmore does not like surprises. You follow my route, my timing, my instructions. You do not improvise. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not pretend this job makes you important." Ethan held his eyes for one quiet second. Understood. That should have satisfied Victor, but it did not, because humility irritates proud men when it refuses to bend. The elevator opened, and Madison entered with her assistant, Claire Monroe, walking half a step behind her with a tablet hugged to her chest. Madison wore a cream coat and dark sunglasses, her hair pinned neatly, her face unreadable. She looked at Ethan, then at the open hood of the limousine. Problem? No, ma'am, Ethan replied. Just checking before we leave. Victor scoffed. He is nervous. Ethan did not answer. Madison removed her sunglasses, and for a moment her blue eyes rested on his hands. They were rough, steady, marked by work and time. Are you nervous, Mr. Cole? She asked. Ethan thought of Lily sleeping under a faded quilt, of bills on the kitchen counter, of promises a father makes even when no one else believes he can keep them. No, ma'am, he said. I am grateful. Claire looked up from her tablet, softened by the answer. Madison looked away first. Then drive. As Ethan opened the rear door, Victor leaned close enough for only him to hear. Remember your place. Ethan's expression did not change. I never forgot it. And when the limousine rolled out into the cold morning traffic, Madison Whitmore did not yet know that the quiet man in front of her had already noticed the same gray sport utility vehicle pass the garage entrance twice. By 8:15, the limousine had crossed the river and slipped into the downtown rush, surrounded by delivery vans, office commuters, and buses breathing warm exhaust into the morning air. Madison sat in the back seat reviewing documents for a private meeting that, according to Claire, could decide the future of 3,000 jobs across the Midwest. Her voice stayed smooth as she dictated notes, but Ethan could hear the tension beneath each sentence, the careful weight of a woman who had learned to carry entire buildings on her shoulders without letting anyone see her knees shake. Move the Hammond file to the encrypted folder, Madison said. Call Senator Blake afternoon. Claire tapped quickly. And the Lakeside testimony? Madison paused. No one outside this car discusses that. Victor turned slightly from the front passenger seat. That is why we changed the route, Miss Whitmore. Ethan's eyes lifted to the rearview mirror. Changed it when? Victor's jaw tightened. That is not your concern. Madison glanced up. Is there a problem, Mr. Cole? Ethan eased the car through a yellow light, his hands calm at 10 and 2. Only a question, ma'am. The tablet shows Lakeshore Drive. We just turned west. Victor gave a dry laugh. Congratulations. You can read a map. Claire stopped typing. The silence that followed was thin, sharp, and uncomfortable. Madison folded one document and slid it into a leather case. Victor has handled my security for 6 years. Follow his instructions. Yes, ma'am. Ethan did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply drove, because sometimes wisdom looks like obedience until the right moment proves it was attention. Outside, the city began to change. Glass towers gave way to older brick buildings, then warehouse streets, then a quiet industrial stretch where traffic thinned sooner than it should have. Ethan noticed a coffee shop with no customers, a construction sign without workers, and the same gray sport utility vehicle 2 blocks back. Never close enough to accuse, never far enough to dismiss. Madison watched him through the mirror. You see something? Maybe nothing. Victor snapped. Then say nothing. Ethan slowed near a stop sign, allowing a school bus to pass. For a second, children's faces filled the side windows, bright backpacks, sleepy smiles, little hands fogging the glass. Ethan thought of Lily, of her laugh when she tried to braid his hair, of the hospital bracelet she kept in a shoebox because she said it reminded her she had already beaten hard days before. His throat tightened, but his face remained still. Madison saw the change, small as it was. You have a daughter. It was not a question. Yes, ma'am. 8 years old. And her mother? The car seemed quieter after that. Ethan looked ahead. Gone 4 years. Claire lowered her eyes. Even Victor said nothing. Madison's expression softened for half a heartbeat, then closed again like a curtain pulled before a storm. I am sorry, she said. Ethan nodded once. Thank you. The words were simple, but they filled the car with something money could not command. Respect. Not friendship yet. Not trust. Just the first fragile inch of grace. Then Ethan saw it. The gray sport utility vehicle turning with them again. No signal. No hesitation. Same distance. Same driver's silhouette. He adjusted the mirror 1 degree. Victor noticed. Eyes forward, Cole. Ethan obeyed with his face, not with his instincts. 2 miles ahead, the private road toward the Lakeside Conference Center narrowed between bare trees and stone walls. The tablet flickered once, then corrected itself. Claire frowned. That is strange. I just lost service. Madison reached for her phone. So did I. Victor shifted in his seat, too quickly. Ethan heard the leather creak, saw the guard's right hand cover his own phone instead of checking it. That was when the truth entered quietly, without sirens, without shouting. The danger was not only behind them. It was already inside the car. The private road carried them away from the city as if Chicago itself had stepped back and closed a door. Bare trees lined both sides, their branches scratching at the pale sky, while Lake Michigan flashed silver through gaps in the stone wall. Madison held her phone higher, searching for a signal that would not return. Claire tried hers twice, then whispered, "Nothing." Victor looked straight ahead. "Service is always weak out here." Ethan did not look at him. "Not on this road." Victor turned. "You have driven this road before?" "No, then how would you know?" Ethan guided the limousine around a slow bend, keeping his voice level. "Because there are 3 carrier towers within 5 miles, and the conference center uses a private booster. Dead zones do not usually arrive exactly after a route change." Claire's fingers froze above her tablet. Madison's eyes lifted. Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You did your homework for a temporary job." "I do homework for anything that carries people I am responsible for." The words landed softly, yet the car felt smaller after them. Madison studied Victor now, not with fear, but with the first clean edge of suspicion. "Why was the route changed?" she asked. Victor adjusted his cuffs. "A traffic advisory." "From whom?" "My office." "Show me." He hesitated only a fraction, but Ethan saw it. Madison saw it too. That was the trouble with lies. They could dress well, speak confidently, and sit in the front seat, but sooner or later they blinked. The road dipped toward a narrow stretch bordered by a closed service gate and an old maintenance shed. Ahead, orange cones blocked half the lane. No workers. No trucks. No flashing county vehicle. Ethan reduced speed, not suddenly, not enough to alarm anyone watching, just enough to buy 3 extra seconds. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "please fasten your seat belt tighter." Victor snapped. "She is already belted." Madison did not move. "Why, Ethan?" "Because the cones are too clean for a work site, and the mud beside them has fresh tire tracks." Claire turned pale. "What does that mean?" Ethan's eyes moved once to the mirror. The gray sport utility vehicle had slowed behind them. Another dark sedan waited near the service gate, engine running. The world outside became strangely quiet, the kind of quiet that carries no peace. Victor reached for the center console. Ethan spoke before his hand touched it. "Do not." The single word changed everything. Madison stared at Victor's hand. Claire stopped breathing for a moment. Victor laughed too loudly. "You are making a mistake, driver." Ethan kept both hands on the wheel. "Maybe, but I would rather be wrong early than sorry late." For the first time, Victor's polished mask cracked. He looked at Madison, then at the road, then back at Ethan, measuring a man he had dismissed too quickly. Madison's voice came low and firm. "Victor, put your hands where I can see them." Outside, rain began to tap the windshield, light at first, then steady, turning the glass into a moving veil. Ethan eased the limousine forward, passing the first cone by inches. The dark sedan's headlights switched on. Behind them, the gray vehicle rolled closer. Claire whispered, "Ethan." He nodded once, calm as a prayer. "I see them." And in that moment, Madison Whitmore understood something money had never taught her. The poorest man in the car was the only one who had seen the truth before it trapped them. The dark sedan moved first, rolling out from beside the service gate with slow, deliberate confidence, not rushing, not swerving, simply placing itself across the lane like a locked door. Behind them, the gray sport utility vehicle closed the distance until its headlights filled the rear window. Claire's tablet slipped from her lap onto the floor with a soft thud. Madison did not scream. She did not beg. She sat very still, the way powerful people sit when they realize power has left the room. "Victor," she said, "explain this." Victor's mouth tightened. "You should have sold the Lakeside division." Madison's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. "So this is about the testimony." "This is about survival," Victor replied. "Yours, mine, everyone's. You were going to ruin men who do not forgive." Ethan listened, watched, measured. Rain crawled down the windshield in crooked silver lines. The wipers swept left, then right, counting seconds no one else knew they still had. Ethan, Madison said quietly. Can you get us out? Victor laughed. He is a driver. Ethan looked at the blocked road, the ditch on the right, the narrow shoulder on the left, the old maintenance shed 30 yards ahead, and the loose gravel where the pavement broke near the lake wall. Yes, ma'am, he said. But you need to trust me before you understand me. Madison's eyes met his in the mirror. For all her wealth, for all her contracts and towers and private boardrooms, that was the most expensive thing anyone had asked from her in years. Trust. She gave one small nod. Ethan shifted the car into reverse, then stopped. The gray vehicle behind them expected panic. The sedan ahead expected surrender. Ethan gave them neither. He lowered his window 2 inches, just enough to hear the rain, the engines, the rhythm of the road. Then he turned to Claire. Seatbelt locked. Yes. Madison. Yes. Victor reached toward the door. Do not make this worse. Ethan's voice remained gentle. You already did. He moved suddenly, but not wildly. The limousine rolled backward 3 feet, angled right, then forward again, not at the sedan, but toward the gravel shoulder where ordinary drivers saw only mud and risk. Tires spat water. The heavy vehicle groaned, but Ethan guided it with clean patience, using the slope instead of fighting it. Madison gripped the armrest, her breath tight. Claire closed her eyes. Victor braced himself, stripped of command. The limousine slid past the cones with inches to spare, its side mirror folding against a branch. For one breath, it seemed impossible. Then the road opened. Ethan did not speed like a reckless man. He drove like a father carrying precious lives, steady enough to protect them, brave enough to choose the narrow way. Behind them, confusion replaced control. Ahead, the old maintenance shed flashed by, and Ethan turned onto a service road hidden beneath wet leaves. The city disappeared. The lake wind rose. Madison looked at the back of his head, no longer seeing worn fabric or tired shoulders, but discipline, sacrifice, and a grace too quiet to explain. Who are you? She whispered. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Someone who promised his daughter he would come home. The service road narrowed beneath a canopy of wet branches, its cracked pavement curling along the lake bluff like something forgotten by the county years ago. Ethan kept the limousine at a controlled pace, never asking more from the road than it could give. Madison watched the mirrors. Claire clutched the fallen tablet against her chest. Victor sat rigid, silent now, his authority shrinking with every mile. Where are we going? Madison asked. Somewhere with cover, a landline, and more than one exit. Ethan said. You know a place? I know how to look for one. The answer was simple, but it carried a lifetime behind it. A quarter-mile ahead, the service road dipped beside a cluster of pine trees and an old caretaker cabin near the edge of a closed marina. Its windows were dark, its porch sagging, but the gravel lot showed no fresh tire marks. Ethan pulled behind the structure, angled the limousine away from the road, and shut off the engine. The sudden quiet felt enormous. Only rain on the roof, lake whined through the trees, and Madison's uneven breath remained. Ethan turned slightly. No one leaves the car until I check the cabin. Victor gave a bitter smile. Still pretending you are in charge. Ethan looked at him, not angry, not proud. No, just responsible. Those words ended the argument better than shouting ever could. He stepped outside, rain darkening his jacket instantly, and moved toward the cabin with careful economy, noticing the warped step, the loose gutter, the half-open side window, the old phone line running along the wall. Madison followed him with her eyes until he disappeared around the corner. Claire, she whispered. Search his name again when service returns. Claire nodded. Madison, he saved us. Madison looked down at her hands, hands that had signed mergers, fired executives, built an empire, and still trembled now. I know. Ethan returned less than 2 minutes later. Clear. There is a wall phone inside, but I need to see if it works. Bring your coat. Leave the tablet. Victor stays with me. Victor stiffened. Absolutely not. Madison's voice cut through the rain-softened air. You will do exactly what he says. For the first time since Ethan had met her, she did not sound like a billionaire giving an order. She sounded like a woman choosing truth over pride. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar dust, cold ashes, and lake damp. Claire helped Madison sit near the old stone fireplace while Ethan checked the phone. No dial tone. He studied the line, then the small junction box near the pantry. Cut outside, he said. Claire swallowed. Can you fix it? Maybe enough to send a call. Madison watched him kneel with a pocket knife, a strip of tape, and hands that seemed too skilled for the story he had told the world. As he worked, his wallet slipped from his jacket and opened on the floor. A photograph of Lily slid out, along with a worn military identification card faded at the edges. Madison picked it up before thinking. The words struck her harder than thunder. United States Navy. Special Warfare. Ethan Cole. Her breath caught. Ethan looked over, and for one long second the cabin held perfectly still. He did not reach for it. He did not explain. He only said, "That was another life." Madison stared at the quiet driver she had nearly dismissed, and all her judgment fell silent. Madison held the faded card as if it weighed more than the cabin itself. Special Warfare. The words did not shout, yet they filled every corner with a kind of honor money could never purchase. Claire stared at Ethan, her face pale with astonishment. Victor looked away, suddenly interested in the rain streaking down the broken window. "You were Navy," Madison said softly. Ethan returned to the junction box, folding a small copper wire with steady fingers. "A long time ago." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have used for years." The cabin settled around them with small wooden creaks, and outside the lake wind pressed against the walls like a warning. Madison stood, still holding the card. "Why hide it?" Ethan's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with memory. "Because some chapters do not end when the uniform comes off. They follow you into grocery stores, school pickup lines, hospital waiting rooms. People hear the title and expect a hero. My daughter just needed a father." Claire blinked back tears. Madison lowered the card, ashamed of every easy judgment she had made in a glass office above the city. "And Lily's medicine?" she asked. Ethan paused. "Her treatments are expensive. I do honest work. That is all." Victor gave a humorless breath. "Touching." Ethan looked at him once. "Do not make small what you do not understand." The sentence was quiet, but it removed the last false pride from the room. Madison turned toward Victor. "Who paid you?" Victor's face hardened. "People who know how the world works. Names. You will never reach that hearing." Ethan finished twisting the wire, lifted the phone, and listened. A faint tone crackled through, weak but alive. "Grace sometimes arrives like that, not as thunder, but as a thin sound returning through a broken line." Ethan dialed 3 numbers, then paused and dialed from memory instead, a longer sequence that made Madison look up. "Who are you calling?" "Someone who answers when I use my real name." The line clicked twice. Ethan spoke with calm precision. "This is Cole. Authentication November 7. Civilian protection situation near North Shore Marina cabin. 2 principals. 1 compromised security lead, possible corporate coercion tied to federal testimony. Request law enforcement coordination and medical standby." Madison did not understand every word, but she understood the room had changed. Ethan was no longer asking the world for help as a poor driver. He was speaking in a language built from duty, discipline, and trust earned in places she had never seen. When he hung up, Claire whispered, "Are they coming?" Ethan nodded. "Yes." Madison looked toward the door. In the distance, faint through rain and trees, came the sound of engines on the service road. Victor smiled for the first time. "So are they." Ethan moved to the window, lifted the curtain half an inch, then let it fall. 3 vehicles. Madison's breath caught. "Can we run?" Ethan looked at Lily's photograph on the floor, then at Madison and Claire. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "We do not need to run far. We need to last long enough for truth to arrive." He guided them toward the back room, positioned Victor in plain sight near the table, and placed the repaired phone beside Madison. There was no violence in his movements, no hunger for conflict, no performance. Just control, just protection, just a man who had once learned how to survive storms and had chosen, after all of it, to remain kind. Outside, headlights swept across the cabin walls. Inside, Madison Whitmore finally understood that bravery was not loud. Sometimes bravery was a broke single father standing between danger and strangers because dignity had never allowed him to do less. The headlights stopped outside the cabin, cutting through the rain in long white bars that slid across the walls and found every nervous face inside. Claire held the phone close with both hands. Madison stood behind the kitchen counter, no longer wearing the mask of a billionaire, only the expression of a woman who had finally learned that control and safety were not the same thing. Ethan placed Lily's photograph back into his wallet and tucked it inside his jacket, close to his heart. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "No sudden moves. No raised voices. Let them believe they still have time." Madison swallowed. "And what do? We tell the truth in the right order." Victor gave a short laugh from the table. "You think truth stops people like them?" Ethan looked at him with a calm that felt almost merciful. "No, but it gives good people something to stand on." Outside, car doors opened. Footsteps crossed wet gravel. A man called Madison's name, polite and cold, as if arriving for a business lunch instead of a betrayal. "Miss Whitmore, we only want the files. Come out, and this ends peacefully." Madison's fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. Those files contained proof that senior executives had hidden safety failures, stolen pensions, and planned to silence every worker who spoke up at the Lakeside hearing. She had built her empire believing numbers told the truth, but Ethan had shown her that people did. Ethan nodded toward the phone. Claire pressed redial with trembling hands. A faint connection clicked alive. This time, Madison spoke. "This is Madison Whitmore. I am at the North Shore Marina cabin. My security chief has been compromised. I am preserving evidence for federal testimony. I need law enforcement dispatched to my exact location." Her voice shook once, then steadied. Ethan watched the window. The men outside kept talking, their words smooth, their patience thinning, but he did not answer them with fear. He moved to the old fuse box near the pantry, flipped one breaker, then another. The porch light burst on suddenly, bathing the front steps in yellow. At the same time, Claire opened the side curtain just enough for the repaired phone line and Madison's live call to be visible from the road. It was not force. It was exposure. It was the one thing corruption hates most. "What are you doing?" Victor hissed. Ethan said, turning on the lights. A distant siren rose beyond the trees, faint at first, then growing. Another sound followed, deeper, rhythmic, approaching from the lakeshore side. Madison looked up. Through the rain-blurred window, red and blue lights appeared between the pines, followed by 2 county sheriff vehicles and a dark federal sedan. The men outside stopped moving. Their confidence drained into the mud around their polished shoes. Then a helicopter swept over the marina, its searchlight gliding across the roof. Not dramatic, not cruel, simply undeniable. Claire began to cry softly, not from fear now, but release. Victor lowered his head. Madison turned to Ethan, stunned by the quiet precision of everything he had done. "You planned this," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "I prepared for what pride ignored." Minutes later, officers entered, voices controlled, hands open, giving instructions that restored order without chaos. The files were secured. Victor was escorted outside. The men who had come through the rain with threats now stood speechless beneath the porch light. Madison stepped into the doorway as the storm thinned into mist. An older federal agent approached Ethan, stopped 3 feet away, and studied his face as if seeing a ghost from a nobler chapter. Then the agent straightened. "Chief Cole," he said softly, with reverence that silenced everyone nearby. "It has been a long time." The cabin went still. Madison looked from the agent to Ethan, and for the second time that night, the world she understood became smaller than the man she had underestimated. The federal agent's words settled over the marina cabin like a church bell after a storm. "Chief Cole, not driver, not broke man, not temporary hire. Chief." Madison stood beneath the porch light with rain dripping from the edge of her coat, and for the first time in years, she had no speech ready, no polished answer, no business shield to hide behind. Ethan only nodded to the agent. "Not tonight, Harris." Agent Harris softened. "You saved more than one life tonight." Ethan looked toward the road where Victor sat in the back of a sheriff vehicle, head low, surrounded not by shame shouted at him, but by truth he could no longer outrun. "Tonight was about Miss Whitmore," Ethan said. "And those workers." Madison stepped closer. "No, Ethan. Tonight was also about you." He turned away as if praise were heavier than rain. By dawn, the hearing had changed. The evidence Madison carried reached the right hands. The lakeside workers were protected. The men who had tried to bury the truth found themselves answering questions under bright lights, with names, dates, accounts, and signatures placed neatly before them. There was no grand revenge. There was only accountability, And sometimes that is the cleanest kind of justice. 2 days later, Madison arrived at St. and Children's Medical Center wearing no designer armor, no sunglasses, no entourage, only a soft blue sweater and a folder held against her chest. Ethan was in Lily's room, helping his daughter color a paper rocket ship while an infusion pump clicked gently beside the bed. Lily looked up first. "Daddy, the pretty lady from your new job is here." Ethan stood quickly. "Miss Whitmore." Madison almost flinched at the formality. "Madison, please." Lily smiled. "Did my dad drive good?" Madison looked at Ethan, then at the little girl whose courage filled the room more brightly than sunlight through the blinds. "Your dad did more than drive good," she said. "He helped a lot of people find their way home." Lily seemed to consider this seriously. "He does that." The simple faith in her voice broke something gentle inside Madison. She opened the folder and placed it on the small table. "The Whitmore Foundation is covering Lily's treatment. All of it. No announcement. No cameras. No conditions." Ethan's face changed, not with pride, not with victory, but with the stunned humility of a man who had carried too much for too long and suddenly felt one corner of the weight lift. "I cannot accept charity." Madison's eyes filled, but her voice held steady. "It is not charity. It is respect." The room went silent. Even the machine's soft rhythm seemed to fade beneath that word. Respect. The one thing Ethan had never begged for, yet had earned in every quiet choice. Weeks later, when Madison testified, Ethan sat in the back row with Lily beside him, her small hand inside his. Reporters filled the hall. Executives avoided his gaze. Agent Harris stood near the doors and nodded once. When Madison finished, she looked past the cameras, past the lawyers, past every polished face that had once mattered so much, and found Ethan. "Some people protect the truth loudly," she said. "Some protect it quietly. I owe my life to a man who never needed the world to know his worth before he did what was right." No one laughed. No one whispered. The entire room fell still. Ethan lowered his eyes, and Lily leaned against his arm. Madison smiled through tears, not as a billionaire rewarding a poor man, but as a woman finally healed enough to recognize goodness when it stood before her. And in that silence, Ethan Cole received what life had delayed but never denied: dignity, redemption, and a second chance carried home in his daughter's hand.